Welcome back to Mindshift, the podcast to help you shift your thinking so that you can access your natural gifts and talents, which you already have, so that you can live your best life today. Perhaps you're just one mind shift away. Hey, my name's Robin Pullen, and welcome back. In the previous episode, we chatted about thinking, and in particular, I unpacked my strategy for thinking, my thinking style, and how I use my thinking strategy to make sense of my experience in my physical body and in the world around me. And as I make sense of that experience, I give it meaning. And it's the meanings that I give that I use to create emotion, and then use that emotion to set in place these beliefs that we're talking about. In the bigger picture, in Mindshift, we're talking about mindset and how I have found myself to be that very word, set in my mind in certain ways. And some of those ways, based on those beliefs, are helpful, and some of them are not. And it's not right or wrong or good or bad. Really, what I want to discover is where I have limiting beliefs, or where I have beliefs that have held me back about key aspects, perhaps relationship, perhaps money, perhaps excellence, perhaps the work that I do, perhaps significance, what's important to me. There are ideas that I've invested with emotion, and I've allowed them to grow up, if you will, into these big ideas that become objective, and they lose their subjectivity. And because that made them objective, right, they are truth with a capital T. And as true as they feel they are to me, they might not be a truth, or at least that truth, that reality to me, isn't serving me. And I'm on a journey to figure these ideas out and dismantle them, perhaps dislodge them, perhaps right size or reorganize some of these beliefs and these thinkings, and relearn how I emote, how I feel about things, so that I can work with God, the universe, with energy, with the world around me, to create the future that I desire and to become the person that my desired future demands. So in this episode, I want to talk about this idea of thinking and emoting, and if there's time, perhaps in this one or the next, something that I've stumbled onto that could make all the difference. But let me not get ahead of myself. So remember, thinking is this strategy that my own neurology, my own system of how my body works, how my brain works, as I make sense of that event. So something happens outside of myself, let's call that a stimulus, and I have a primary response. And in that primary response, I'm using the beauty that is my mind, this brain, this amazing machine, to calibrate this primary experience. And in that calibrating, in measuring, I make sense of it. I make sense of what it, through my senses, what it felt like, what I saw, what I experienced. There's a convoluted word. What I experienced in my physicality, in my physical body, in my touch sense, or and all those sensory calibrations I use to make sense of this experience, and I give it a label. I could call it hot or cold. I call it quick or slow. I could call it soft and gentle, or hard, or aggressive, or adventurous. And as I calibrate, as I measure that experience, I give it this label, if you would, then something happens in between my head and my heart. So in my thinking, I calibrate that label, and I give it a range. I give it a measurement, another measurement, and that measurement is what I use to create emotion. Now, in this emoting, I could, because of the meaning I give to that experience, and if you're following with me on the video, or if you're following me in the series, in the sequence of conversations, I have layered meanings and calibrations, or first calibrations and then meanings, one on top of the other. And as I do that, I create this rich picture in my mind, in the theater of my mind, the theater of the movie of my mind. So what was a simple primary experience, which really could have just a base and neutral state, can very quickly escalate into something that has more than one sensory experience and more than one meaning. And then that's no longer primary. We'd call that a meta state, a higher state, or a builded state. So I'd have this quick motion that I when I experience the quickness, I give that a measurement. And perhaps when something's happening quick, so when something's rushing towards me at a fast pace, which I call quick, I could interpret that to be scary or frightening. And if it's frightening, then I can calibrate that next layer of experience, that sensory experience. My body responds to that frightening experience, and I have a discomfort, I have a dis-ease, an uneasiness. And then I add another meaning. So when I have this uneasy feeling about something that's rushing towards me, that's quick, about something I visually see in the world around me, perhaps it's a person, perhaps it's a vehicle, perhaps it's an object flying towards me, very quickly I manufacture another calibration called fear. And now I'm afraid, I'm scared of this uncomfortable, this thing that my mind goes, hey, wait, this is unfamiliar to me, this is scary to me, and it's rushing on to me. And now I have this fear, this is dangerous to me idea next to or underneath or with this fast pace, and I have the sensation of something that could hurt me alongside the sensation of something that's rushing towards me, and that sensation of fear, that concept of fear grows even more. And quickly, before I even before I even realize it, so like outside of the visual eye, the conscious eye, I have created this experience in my physical body that I physically experience, based on virtual stuff, based on the mechanism, the sequence, the structure of my thinking in my brain. And that physical experience could then manifest, can be felt like a tightness in my shoulders and my chest. Like when I start the conversation, my shoulders are back and I'm comfortable. And even as I think of this object rushing towards me and I start to explain it, in the last episode, I talked about dialing down and slowing things down so I can see what's going on. And as I dial it down and it becomes more clear to me, I experience, even in my physical body now, I experience that, what can I call it? An anxiety, a tension, my muscles tensing up, my chest compressing and closing in on myself. And so rather than an expansion, there's a contraction in my physical body. And even as I say that, I can feel the difference in my physical body and in my breath, the difference between something that's expansive and space and good for me and something that's contracted and compression and this idea of this object that's rushing towards me. And I create this physical state. And with that state, I experience emotion. I'm emoting. I'm giving this experience, each of these layers, an emotion. And this is how we create emotion, right? This is how a primary trigger, something pretty neutral, it's just an object, it's just outside of me, but it has characteristics, right? So there's a substance to that object. And even that object and its substance has another characteristic in time and space. And as that time and space changes, I give that shift, that change, meaning. And then I experience something in my physical body in response to that meaning, and I give that a meaning as I make sense of that. Oh, this is happening. Oh, this is happening towards me. Oh, this happening towards me might mean that. And if I'm experiencing that, then I physically I feel something in my body, and I have this anxiety, I have this emotion. So why do I tell you that? Here's the one thing, is that I've created this emotion. I never saw this before. And I wonder if, as you hear me speak, if you're watching the video, you see us unpack this, if you're listening to the audio, and you hear us unpacking this scenario that has, perhaps at first glance, it's just one moment. But in that moment, there are several touch points. There's this object, this thing outside of myself, and then there's an immediate, that primary thing, and then there's an immediate response within myself, which is one layer above primary, and it's still physiological, it's a biological response. But very quickly, almost like stacking up and cascading up one above the other or one over the other, I have these other sensations, and each of them, that sense creates an emotion. I emote, and each of those emotions I create meaning, and then this dance, this spiraling upward dance takes place in a nanosecond, in a split second. And if I'm not conscious to it, and most of the time I'm not, right? Most of the time we're doing life, we're living life. We're not able to slow down yet and become aware, consciously aware of how we are responding in a moment and how we're using that response to create our next moment, our next response. And when we do have the skill to slow these things down, these sense makings and these meaning makings, how we make sense of our life experience, and how we make meaning based on that sense, that understanding, and how we can dance up and up and up, and it's very quick to create a state. And here's what I become aware of, that I can find myself in a state before I realize I'm in that state, and I can mistake. It's like I can discount, or I can almost erase what's just happened between that primary experience, that primary trigger, that primary state, and this now coalesced, this built up, this very intense. It's so intense that it feels like it's a part of me, and that intensity, that emotion feels so real. It's like it feels so real that it's difficult to be able to break down and kind of reorganize all the individual parts. And because it's difficult to dismantle them, I found it difficult to believe that, it's not just this big thing. It's not just anxiety. This anxiety is actually made up of a number of moving parts. And perhaps that's the gift I want to share in this particular episode, is when I develop the skill to slow things down in the movie of my mind, or the theater of my mind. And what I mean is, as I'm learning to recognize my structure of thinking, influenced by my biology and my neurology, neither of them are right or wrong. It's just the way I am, right? My physical body, my frame, I experience life through the lenses of this frame, of how high, how tall I am, how big I am, how much I weigh, how my physical body, my agility, and with my body weight, how I feel in the space that I'm in the air that I'm in the room that I am in. And my sensory experience, my biological experience of this life is remarkably different to someone else who has a different physiology, a different biology, has a different height, has a different body frame, has a different weight, a skeletal structure, weight to their skeleton, has a different body mass. And the way their body moves through the air and through water or through space, how I feel as I sit on this couch to do this video, could be completely different to how somebody else, significantly different in their size and their physicality, how they fill up the space on this couch. Same couch, same space, same moment, completely different life experience. And with that different life experience, different meanings and different emotions. And then I come back to, as I start to recognize my thinking structure, my strategy of thinking, and I'm slowing down, I get to see each part for what it is. And I'm not living this life of a big word, coalesced. It's like living a numb life. I'm experiencing my feelings. I was experiencing my feelings, right? But without literacy, without understanding, without specificity or clarity. So I could go from sleep state to awake state to sad state, and not see any of the moments in between, any of the experiences that make up the difference between waking up and then becoming sad. I might miss moments that I could experience just neutral, or I could experience gratitude, or I could experience happiness. And because I wasn't able to slow my thinking down and see, okay, now there's a trigger, there's a response, and I'm catching myself doing the thinking. Okay, that happened, and I gave it a meaning. And because of the meaning I give to that particular happening, I experience an emotion. And as I experience the emotion, I give that a higher meaning. So I use the word sad. I wake up. Let's do an example. I wake up, and I might appreciate that I woke up, right? So I went to sleep and that wasn't my last breath. I have a new breath today. And after waking up, I might appreciate that I get to drink some water. I normally have a vitamin B tablet and some supplements in the morning. And I can appreciate that I have water next to me, that I don't have to go and find it before I can have that tablet. And then I appreciate that, hey, my body's moving. I did a great exercise yesterday, or I did a good run, and I'm not as stiff this morning as I thought I might be. So I'm still agile and I can move. And then I might appreciate that as I stand up for the day, then I'm reminded of what I want to do today. And then as I reflect on that, I'm reminded of what I didn't get done. And I discount those 3, 4, 5, 6 things prior to that moment. And I focus my attention on what I didn't get done. And then I distract myself. Then I allow myself I focus, I concentrate my thinking on the thoughts in that last moment of what I didn't get done. And as I concentrate my thinkings and my feelings, and I do the measurement and the calibration, and I confuse myself. In a previous episode, I talked about personalizing. And I might think about what I didn't get done, and then I might tell myself something about myself, about my skills or my experience or my aptitude or my commitment. And I get confused. I get totally confused. And I completely delete those couple of things that happened between waking up and now getting caught on this set of ideas that remind me of what it feels like to be sad. And in that moment, then I'm just holding on the sadness, right? I am not sad. I'm doing sadness. Because as I think of what I didn't do, I feel the discomfort of that, right? So I feel the disappointment about myself. And when I do disappointment, then my body follows. And subconsciously, like outside of conscious thinking, when I'm doing disappointment, my body goes, oh, I know how to do that. That feels shoulders down, chest compressed. That feels breathing slower or slowing down my thinking and thinking poorly about myself. And when I experience that sadness, then I go, oh, I must be sad because this is how I'm feeling, right? And then if I'm telling myself I must be sad, then my brain is genius, man. My body is an amazing mechanism. It goes, oh, okay, you want to experience sadness. Okay, cool. Let's change the frequency in our energy. Let's change the way our blood flows. Let's change what we're doing with our face. So no more smiling, right? No more happy face. No, let's do sadness. Let's drop the jaw. Let's get lethargic in our face muscles. And perhaps even something starts to happen with the flow of blood, my rate of flow of blood and the sweatiness on my arms and my body. And very quickly, I can manufacture an experience to convince myself that I am sad. And I can be numb to it. And when I say numb, I can be like unconscious. I'm not consciously alert, or I'm not consciously awake. I'm not seeing my own thinking structure, my own strategies creating this experience. And so often in the past, I found myself doing depression. Out of nowhere. It's like I could be happy. There's no real reason except I'm reminded of a thought. And because of my strategy of thinking, I then do all these things. I do the sense making and the meaning making. And as I do those in between that dance, I create the emoting. I'm giving emotional measurement to that sensation as I layer higher and higher in these different thoughts. And I realize, and it's kind of like a radical responsibility. It's like, whoa, man, I'm not depressed. I'm doing depression. Now let me place a caveat here. There are people who might be listening to this who are in a real experience, a real depression experience, where there's physiology and there's biology and there's chemistry in your physical body. And I'm not denying that. I'm not discounting that. And you might even be going for therapy, and you might have some medical advice and chemical supplements. There might be stuff that you're doing, practices that you're doing, and foodstuffs and to help you manage that experience. And I'm not deleting that. And I recognize how much of that in my own experience I manufactured. And I'm not discounting that there was a physical reality to it. So there's something in the world around me, in my environment, that was true enough, a physical reality in the scenario around me, that I could give it the meaning that I was giving. So there was something there, yet I still do the thinking. I still use the thinking strategy, my neurology, to create that experience and then build and cascade and find myself doing depression. And when I find myself doing depression, then my body's brilliant. Then my body goes, oh yes, I know what that feels like. Let's physically do that, right? I know what that feels like. Let's physically do that. Let's contract in our physical muscles. Let's contract in our chest. Let's contract in our breath, in our breathing. And as we do that, we lose oxygen and my physical body responds. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm not here to say stop your medication, stop your therapy, stop all that stuff. I am here to say is slow your thinking down. And if anything, can you start to recognize that you are not your thinking? Your physical experience, right? The state that you experience, whether you're doing happiness, whether you're doing sadness, whether you're doing excitement, elatement, what's that word? Or you're doing anxiety and depression. They are those physical experiences, that mind state, that state of being is created, is manufactured by the quality of your thinking structure, of your strategies. And if that is the case, what could you do? What could you start to do in your world right now? Whether it's in the positive space or the negative space. And I need to put that calibration in. Sometimes I've been blindly positive, right? I've been over optimistic. I've been able to convince myself that I'm doing the right thing and that I'm in the right place and yay, this is really awesome. And yet in that space, I've been blind to the unintended natural consequences of that thinking or that belief. And part of what I haven't been able to experience is because in that particular patch, I convinced myself that I was doing good and I was doing right. But I wasn't seeing the full truth. I was holding on to one objective or one set of objective truths, ideas loaded with emotion that I made into beliefs. And whilst I held them in place, I was unable to see other things. And as I'm starting to slow my thinking down, I'm able to see those thoughts and ideas for what they are and to bring subjectivity back into it. And perhaps you can start with that. Perhaps you can start to give yourself permission to allow your experience to kind of slow down. And I use that picture of a dial, or perhaps another way to put it is into, play. What's it like? Preview on a decoder, on a satellite TV decoder or a movie. You can put it into slow motion. And slow a experience down so that you can start to recognize the individual parts that make up that experience. And with that sight, with being able to see the individual parts that make up an experience, you can start to see how you're doing your sense making and you're creating meaning, giving meaning, and emoting. And as something makes a layer of sense and you have that meaning become clear to you, then you create an experience, an emotional experience. And as you emote that, you create opportunity for another meaning as it makes sense. And as you start to slow these things down, right? And pick can just be in a breath. It could be just like as something's happening, okay, hang on, let me see what it is. What am I thinking here? What am I experiencing here? One thing I've learned to do with emotional literacy practices is to catch a word and to go, okay, how do I know that? Okay, I feel sad. How do I know that I'm sad? What's happening in the world around me that I calibrate this as sad? What's happening in my physical body that tells me, oh, this experience equals sad? What's happening in my thinking? How am I using my thinking strategy, my neurology, my system of thought to calibrate, to say this is sad? And if it could be sad, but if it's not, what else could it be? What other words describe the emotings or the sense makings that are around, nearby, above, below, that make up this idea of sad? And as I tease that out, as I dismantle and just open that up, I can become more clear. I can have a richer experience of what's happening for me that I call it sad. Now, on the other side, happiness. I can be happy about something, and that might be okay to say, yeah, okay, no, I'm happy. But how do I know I'm happy? And if you can do this, perhaps this is a great experience. You say, if you're in a great space, so often as a coach, I speak to people and I ask, how can I help you? I'm like, I'm good, man. I'm good. I don't need your help. I'm in a great space. And I'm like, how do you know that? Have you taken the time to slow your will down, to slow your thinking down, so that you can recognize what exactly is happening for you, that you calibrate this as good or happy? And there's a gift there, I believe, to be able to say, oh, this particular action makes me feel happy. When I do this particular action in that particular way, that's how my body feels alive. Oh, that's what's valuable to me. Oh, now I see that's what's important to me. When certain people say particular kind of things in a specific kind of way, well, that makes me happy. So it's not just blanket cloud happiness. There's something about how I feel in my body, perhaps. Perhaps there's things about, I think of love languages. I recognize something that I hear. Or perhaps I recognize, oh, there's something about the beauty of this place. I see the design, I see the elegance of a particular place. Or perhaps the creation of the planet I'm around, the earth and the plants and the trees and the sky. I love, if you follow me on socials, I love sky art. I love sunrises and sunsets. And on my trail running, it's not just the running experience that's amazing for me. I can catch myself coming over a rise and I see a sun starting to set. And I see the colors and the clouds and the tints in the tapestry of art in front of me, and I'm like, wow, okay, there's so many things that are happening right now in this moment that I can collectively say I feel happy. And that happiness, that moment, becomes so much richer as I'm able to just slow it down for a moment. Look, I might not even stop running. This might just be happening in the back of my mind. So it's not like I have to stop what I'm doing, but I'm learning to slow, even in the thought place, in the theater of my mind, as I slow these things down, to be able to get a richer experience, a richer understanding of what my experience is in that moment. And my mind jumps to where I want to go in the next episode, which has to do with I'm not just my thinking and I'm not just my emoting. But as I come to a close, as we land this episode, I wonder what you've become aware of, and how, as we learn to recognize our thinking strategy, our strategy for thinking, keeping in mind that you have a neurology, you have these neural pathways that fire together and they wire together, and you have your earth suit. You are you. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It is you. And as you make sense and you create emotings and you make meanings with your neurology in your earth suit, that is your rich experience. And if that experience hasn't been serving you right, and you're looking for a shift, you're looking like I've tried everything else, but I just can't find it. What is it that I need to do to see a shift in my life? Perhaps that shift is in your mind. Perhaps it starts in your mind. When I talk about motivation in the space of motivational talks or leadership or training like that, one of the things that we often say is that motivation follows motion. You got to start. You got to do something. So either through the physical body, do something. But sometimes if you're struggling to do that something, it's because your mind is still set. And when you can shift how you see what it is that you're not doing or wanting to do, you can start to dislodge the hold that your old emotions and your old energies have hold on you. But that's for another talk. Awesome. Thanks for listening, man. If I'd love to know what stood out for you in this particular episode, send me a DM or maybe in the comments below. Are you enjoying the format? This is one of my newer episodes here in this podcast, Mindshift. I look forward to hearing from you, and I trust this is serving you well. Perhaps you're just one mindshift away from experiencing everything that you're hoping for, and your best is yet to come. My name's Robin, and I'll see you on the next one.